PW Thinking Law podcast,
Yes.
episode
9.
9.
This would have been episode 10 had it not been the power issue last week.
Oh yeah, ish.
Yes.
Yeah, we apologize for not having an episode last week.
Yeah,
These power problems we've been dealing with in the country devastated us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but we're back.
Like Mukwat.
Are you? What's that guy like Mukwat? Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense because I'm like, Bolo, like Mukwat. So you were on radio today.
Oh yes, I was on radio.
How was that?
It was actually quite good.
Yeah.
I think because I did so much radio with Swift for quite a long time, we still have that bit of rapport, right? And when I talked to him, I actually felt like I was talking to you, right? Where I'm like, oh no, we're vibing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What were you guys talking about?
We were talking about the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Controlled Investigations Act.
You're an Eddie's by.
The eavesdropping act or whatever it's called. And it was actually quite interesting because, for a very long time, we would get complaints as lawyers, especially when we're looking at gender-based violence matters and domestic violence matters. For this person, wherever I go, they show up. And these are places that I know this person doesn't frequent. So why is it that this person pops up everywhere? And then their cell phone somewhere, this doesn't make sense. Their phone has been cloned or tapped, things like that. So this act, we don't have an act that specifically talked about such activity, but this act actually makes it clear, or tapping a person's phone, intercepting communications and stuff like that is illegal unless you have the necessary order and warrant from the court. So I thought it was quite amazing, and it's a 2022 act. Can you believe it?
It's all brand new information.
It was new to me as well. It was Swift who actually said, hey, there was this thing a few years back. Can we look at it? And at that time, it was a bill. So it's when we were preparing for the show, and I was like, actually, it's an act. And it started in, I think, February 2022.
Oh man, okay. That's we need to add it on our list of topics.
It's quite interesting because it allows people, informants, investigating officers and so on to effectively get identities, like from birth certificates to Mang to passports that are in different names, like pseudonyms for the protection, for the investigation. I was like, wow.
Okay.
This sounds like some
CIA. This is
from birth, even marriage certificate. Can you imagine?
That's crazy.
I was like, wow.
Okay, definitely that's something that we'll talk about, man.
Definitely.
Before we get into today's topic, I want to say a big shout out. You just mentioned who you were with Swift. I want to say a big shout out to Swift, man. Swift is out. He's kicking ass on this radio, bruh. He's out there. He is, man, like the Trump stuff, the China, the trade wars, the Botswana stuff. I love his angles. I love the research. He puts in the work. Shout out Swifty Swift.
Exactly. And when he talks geopolitics, I think that is his passion.
That's what he loves,
And he's using the airwaves to try and get people to understand geopolitics generally. So you can tell when he's busy talking about this, or this is he's passionate. Or hey, this is what's happening.
I remember when I went back to radio. When I got on Gabs FM. And I had the weekday slot. I went back to do the evening show. So before I did it, I was taking it over from Swift. When he was moving back to the afternoon. And I remember when I was getting ready for the show, preparing my show and whatever. You know me. I'm a feel good guy. My radio is feel good, like fun times. I remember, I'm sitting there with the progress manager. He's like, yeah, so, geopolitics, and then, you have to establish the establishment of the precise chief comrade. That's not going to work.
I don't think I'm swift.
I'm not swift. I'm not swift, And I'm glad that it worked out. The show actually came together and it worked the way that it was.
Yeah.
Just saying that to say, everybody has their field, man. And Swift has found his niche and he's absolutely killing it.
He's quite fantastic at it.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of drama in this country.
Is it drama though?
No,
drama makes it sound salacious. So somewhere.
No, I'm not happy with our government and the way they've handled this particular issue. There's drama around it. I think I'm saying drama because of the drama it caused in my life and the lives of other people like me.
Yes.
Of course, talking about the Companies Act.
Yes.
The government decided there needs to be some amendments to the act, right? We'll get into that. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about those amendments and what they meant and what they did and what it looks like. But let's just take it from the top.
Yeah.
According to the government of Botswana, a company under the Companies Act. What are we talking
about? So we're talking about a legal entity that is created when you register it with SIPA, which is the Companies and Intellectual Property Authority. And this legal entity, once registered, now becomes a person under the law. And it can be registered either as a private company or a public company, a company limited by shares, company limited by guarantee, or a closed company. So there are different types of companies that you can register depending on what it is that you want to do.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, recently the Companies Act was updated or amended.
Yes.
Usually what prompts these amendments? Like, how could they update? Do I mean, do you have a
it's actually different reasons for the amendment of different acts, right? More it would be to try and bring the act right? And then it's to try to address certain issues they have they've become like a burning thing, not only nationally but internationally, like the money laundering. So you find for a lot of the amendments that are here, some of them are aimed at issues of money laundering, right? And that's the reason why a revamping of the definition of like a beneficial owner, nominee, and things of that nature. Because what you saw happening for quite some time is there was a lot of fronting, right? Especially in instances where certain industries were reserved for citizens. You would have a situation where a citizen would be made 51% shareholder, but they wouldn't really be a shareholder. They would just be someone so that it looks like we are a citizen-owned company. But the truth of the matter, a lot of those shares belong to other people. Yes.
What's someone might sit there and think to themselves, yeah, but if I'm fronting, I get they're paying me. And they're making their money and they're making their money legally. Otherwise, what's the problem? What damage does that do to not only the local business industry, but also just the economy generally?
Well, I can't really say from the economy generally, right? But the harm that is there is that the reason why certain things are reserved for citizens is to try and make sure citizens have a leg up over people that come from outside in certain industries. And especially for a young democracy like Botswana, right, where you find for a lot of skills maybe we don't have, you will find a situation where government will say, okay, we'll give you, let's say 5 years, where there's an opportunity for skills transfer. And then how is now the skills transfer? Then you hand over the reins to citizens so that the citizen industry in that particular area can improve. But if you then front and pretend, okay, I am a citizen, I am doing this, not only are you taking away the ability for training, but you're also taking away revenue, right? In that, you're a 51% shareholder, and this company in LA turnover 10 million. And also declare the dividends. The 10 million was profit after the deduction and everything. Then it means for about 5,100,000 should be yours. Right? But because you are fronting, hello, like 100,000. And then the 9,900,000 goes to the other people who clothe it in whatever way they want to. And then a lot of times we tell her, because people are not citizens, the money goes outside of the country. 100%. It doesn't stay in country, it's not used in country.
100%.
Yes.
Man, there's a lot of money that leaves Botswana, man. Like,
tell us.
Okay, and I'm talking like even just the legal way, not just the normal way. Like when you really look at a lot of these industries, man, whether it's at the game, property, whatever, residential buildings, and
immovable property.
Yeah, when you look at that, when you look at, I mean, the car industry, car retail industry, when you look at the manufacturing industry, when you look at even just the diamond industry, the amount of money that leaves our country is insane. These fronting cases, are they common? Is it something that happens?
I won't say the cases are common, because in my mind, when you say cases, I think court.
Yes.
But there are many situations of fronting. It is very common, unfortunately, at least from what I have seen. And the other problem with fronting is that the accountability. Right? So the person who actually controls the company would not be the one who they claim controls the company. So high local these are people easily. And then this person owns on what the citizen 51% shareholder sometimes is left holding the bag. Because they are the majority shareholder, they're the ones that were making the decisions of all of these things. And you find out maybe they were never part of any meetings. 51% but nothing, right? So and that's what some of these amendments try to address, because then money laundering comes in. Or these people that seemingly right? But they then use these entities to flush money or wash money and then take it out of the country in clean, quote unquote, money, right? So when investigations happen, they need to know, okay, who was controlling this entity that was used to wash this money? And so if you have this person who's fronting, who's claiming, but the truth of the matter, right? Then it creates a problem, because it's not easy to then track all of these things. And a lot of times money that, in fact, most times, I don't know if there's a time when money that is washed comes from illegal activity. Like human trafficking, trafficking in drugs and narcotics and all of these things. Yes.
This reminds me of a story I heard a few years ago of an individual. This family had a factory. Right? I'm not going to say what they're manufacturing. Get sued. But this family was in manufacturing, and they partnered with some foreigners. They wanted to benefit. The foreigners wanted to benefit on whatever. I've had a long day, but not I told you what kind of day
I completely understand, Carlos.
Very slow today. But yeah, essentially, this family partnered with these foreigners who were coming out of Asia, and they essentially just handed over their company to these dudes for them to run the company. And when they were just shareholders, major shareholders, like we were getting all the benefication and everything, right? And then only to find out that these folks were not paying tax on company. And this company was making ridiculous amounts of money. When I tell you this family was, man, like all the niceness you can imagine. The farms, the Range Rovers, the mansions, go mansion, just nuts. What do you want?
The land of milk and honey.
And then when BRS really now came for them, these Asian dudes ran off to their embassy. And the embassy smuggled them out of the country.
Oh, wow.
Embassy smuggled them out of the country, sent them back home.
Yes.
Because so right profit is the company. No problem. Smuggle them out of the country. When I tell you this family's everything collapsed. Within 6 months, it just everything just collapsed. Because you can imagine now they haven't been involved in running the business, right? So they can't run the business. They don't know the raw material, they don't know any of this stuff. So now they're left holding the bag. And URS came hard and said, no, but you guys benefited from this situation. You guys are the ones who are the directors in this thing. So hold the bag.
Yes. And you know that aside from issue you're fronting, right? That's actually quite common where a person isn't fronting. They are legitimately a shareholder and director. But they know nothing about the company, right? They don't even know what their rights and responsibilities are as a shareholder and a director, right? And they sign.
And if you don't know your rights and responsibilities,
how are you going to execute? Yes. How are you going to do what you need to do? Right? And that's the situation where you end up finding how is he a director? How is he a shareholder? And you know, sometimes that happens where? In marriages. In marriages where a man and a woman will be married. Maybe in community of property, maybe out of community of property. But owner the shares 50-50. And it happens commonly where the woman is the one that does this. My husband
continue running the business.
Will do everything.
I hope my wife doesn't listen to this. we have a few companies that
Carlos, maybe I need to pay a visit to your wife and be like, yeah, so how I live a section.
But you know what the great thing about us is? Before we got married, we went through a ton of counseling. Whether it was, you know, the usual family premarital counseling, whether it was legal counseling. So we are married out of community of property. And we understand, we're very clear about what our, you know, what we own, how everything works and whatever the case is, you know. And there's not an instance where I can go to, like my wife loves me and she trusts me, right? But she would never, I'll never go to her with something like, I'll give it back to you tomorrow. No, you gotta sign it now. That's how it usually happens.
You know what? And the sad thing is, people view it as they make it seem as if you're saying you don't trust your partner.
Yes.
Which is not the case.
Which is
you're just saying, okay, if someone comes to you about you should be able to explain what you were signing. We've had cases where a mortgage bond will be passed over immovable property, right? And then we go to deeds, we get copies. Is this not your signature? Then,
oh man.
And you're like, but you know, it's not an issue of you not trusting your partner. It's an issue of you wanting to understand or signing.
Yes.
Yes.
And if you are trying to if you're trying to understand something that your partner wants you to sign, and your partner feels a way about it or gets upset, that's a red flag.
Yes, you should be saying to your partner, hey, my baby, I can go back the signature, and so I should be told for signing.
100%.
If it wasn't necessary for me to understand, you wouldn't be asking for my signature.
100%.
You know what I mean? So yeah, but how about they look at it and say, hey, can I get trust spouse signing? And I'm like, okay, but even your parents, if your parents bring you something, these people gave you life, right?
Yeah.
They've been raising you, even when you are adopted, and all that.
Yeah.
When they bring a document to you and say, sign here, you don't just sign.
No. Regime or how you out of community of
or a lot of you don't love each other. And you're like,
you guys are expected to divorce. Oh, so you guys are
I hear it so many times, right?
Yeah.
And here's my question. We all know Horonale marriage certificate, right? That's completely different.
Yeah.
Form A, Form B, antenuptial contract, right? Those are things that you should be looking at and saying, this is what we're choosing.
Yes.
So in either situation, you are actually taking steps to say, in the event our marriage comes to an end,
yes,
right?
Yes.
We want this to play in relation to our property.
Yes.
Whether in, out,
whatever the case is.
Right?
Yes.
And every time I say this, people always assume that I'm talking about divorce. Death ends a marriage.
There you go.
You know?
There you go.
So, why is it? Maybe I lectured people too much.
No, but please continue. Please continue. Because anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about.
The companies Act. Yes.
Let's get into the amendments.
Yes.
The first amendment I want to talk about is the one that had to do with company constitutions.
But before that, so there are actually a few amendments that took place.
Okay.
The one early liberating Haki Lumpori commenced in 2025, Act number 3 of 2025.
Okay.
Yadi 24 January 2025.
Yes.
But before then, there were other amendments that were made in, I think, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. Act number 7 of 2022 is similar to 25 January 2022.
Okay.
The reason why this is important is because the Constitution is from that 2022 Act.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was a brand new thing.
No. No.
I had no idea about this 22 one.
So the Constitution amendment came from the 2022 Act, but then and people had a year from February 2022. I think maybe 25 February.
Okay.
What then happened is the timeline, right, quote unquote, was sort of frozen because SIPA, the Register of Companies, nebar baba pakudira like a model constitution for people to use. Yes.
Okay.
And the model constitution in this 2025
the new
Act. And that's when the 1 year restarted from January 2025 when this new Act came into being. So the requirement for companies to have constitutions has been there since 2022. But the timeline was suspended and only started again afresh at this 2025 amendment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So apart from Constitution, what else was in the 2022?
So in the 2022 one, there were actually quite a few amendments. Beneficial owner. And that's because during 2020, 2021, COVID is when we were really hit hard by this grey listing and blacklisting and the FATF stuff. So there were a series of amendments of acts rolliwa out in order to try and deal with those issues, money laundering. Yes.
Now I remember. That's what was going on. Yes. You see what I always say about our government's public relations. I remember I remember. That's what was going on.
So from that blacklisting and greylisting, a few acts were rolled out. I think around 2021, 2022.
Okay.
Trying to address these issues, money laundering. So the need for a constitution, comes from there, from the money laundering aspect. So aside from Kanya fronting and beneficial owners and nominees and all of that, constitution alone arose.
Okay.
Yes.
What's a constitution and how does it help with all of this money laundering stuff and fronting?
So the constitution of the company effectively is the governing document of how the company will operate.
Okay.
Right? That's why IBUA, about how many shares the company has, how the directors' meetings will be held, how the shareholders' meetings will be held. And then it includes any other thing that you might want to include in relation to the operation of the company.
Okay.
Meaning, as long as the constitution doesn't have anything that goes against the Companies Act, it can have any number of things inside, including how the relationship between the directors and shareholders will work, how the shareholders themselves will work. So, for example, one are certain things that only directors are able to do.
Okay.
Right? And then there are certain things that can be done by directors and shareholders. And then there are only things that can be done by shareholders. So it's for you to set out clearly, okay, what is it that you reserve specifically for the shareholder that might not actually be outlined in the Companies Act, and what is it that you're reserving for directors and so on.
So it's essentially just been free for all, in terms of directors could do whatever they want. As long as you guys don't have your own internal agreement.
Yeah, it hasn't been a free for all. What the Act had said before these amendments was that the Companies Act itself would act as a constitution of that particular company. The only type of company that was required to have a constitution was a company limited by guarantee.
Hey, which one is that one?
Effectively, so in the beginning, I said you can have a company limited by shareholding or a company limited by guarantee.
Yeah.
So a company limited by shareholding is the one that we usually know. Varumuto has 10 shares and Bonolo has 20 and so has 50 and all that, right?
Gotcha.
But a company limited by guarantee doesn't have shareholding, which means that the liability in the event the company is liquidated is only to the amount that they have guaranteed to pay. Right, so they'll say we guarantee ha company can insolvent, they liquidate 1,000 pula.
Yeah.
Yes, and a lot of times you find companies limited by guarantees are used as non-profit organizations. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I was very intentional about not going into the different companies because, as I always say. This is we're having a conversation, right? This is public education. But also, my friend runs a law firm. And my friend needs to pay her staff and pay her overheads and everything.
Exactly.
So if you want a proper breakdown of the companies and what, please call the phone and bula fire the invoice.
Exactly.
Okay, sharp.
Yeah.
So essentially what you're saying is a company constitution, it varies. It's different from company to company.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then the other amendment that came in the 2022 Act. There's an act, and right? It's called the Movable Property Security Interest Act.
Okay.
So when you take out a loan, right, there are different types of loans that you can take out. One loan that you can take out is a mortgage loan, right? So where you are saying to the bank or whatever financial institution, and then you can use my immovable property, like Lahas, as security.
Yeah.
And then what the organization then does is they register a mortgage bond bodies. And the mortgage bond is effectively saying motor kolota X amount of money and security for this loan until fully repaid. Whatever.
Okay.
Now, there's also other types of properties that can be used as security, right? So movable property, goloi and things like that.
Yeah.
You can have something called a notarial bond.
Okay.
A notarial bond registered at the deeds registry to effectively use movable property as security. And then you have the Hypothecation Act, some agricultural goods as security. Now, the Movable Assets Act, right? In a situation where you can register security over all movable assets.
Assets, yeah.
Yes, and it was meant to also replace the Hypothecation Act because Yone was focused around agricultural goods. So this one Yone according to the Act, any movable properties as security for a debt that you might get from whichever organization.
Yeah.
So it's one of those acts that was passed, but I've never seen because it renders certain acts that we know exist now, it revokes them.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know. You can't keep piling more on
things
and piling
on
more on because now you're saying SIPA would be able to register these securities the way the deeds registers other types of securities.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, and hey, you remember the last conversation we had about SIPA? I was very upset at them. And then,
I know.
Yeah, after visiting their offices, man, shame. Yeah, those guys are proper overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an excuse for Botswana to be the ones who are suffering.
Yeah.
But the authority, it definitely needs a bit more support from government.
Yeah, no, because remember, SIPA, like I said, is Companies Intellectual Property Authority, right? So not only does it deal with companies, but it also deals with intellectual property. So your trademarks, your patents, your copyrights, and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
And, I think right now, I'm not sure they even have an ability to register patents. Right? Because create this universal remote that's able to convert into a transformer and patent. Who has because with patents, I get you have to establish the what is it? I forgot the word just ran out of my mind. Effectively, you have to establish the originality of that concept and idea, right? Meaning, you have to have someone who's technical enough to say, no, but it's it's not new because
exactly. In the world,
exactly. So, do we even have capacity or people that can do that?
Okay.
So now can you walk on top of that barrier to security? But you know what? That's a conversation for another time.
100%.
Hey, we're dealing with the Companies Act.
That's what we're dealing with. Okay, another amendment spoke to company secretaries now have to be, there's some sort of registration that needs to happen or care with them or training. Please explain.
So in terms of the Companies Act, for a person to be a company secretary, they have to be part of certain professions.
Okay.
So like your lawyers, your accountants, and so on. So effectively, it seems like what they're trying to create is a database of company secretaries.
Okay.
Because what happens now is I will have a profile as Bonolo. And if you ask me to register a company for you, then I have to check whether, yes, I'm a company secretary for this company, upload my certificates and things like that. What I foresee happening, I've been told for the system, registration at the company secretary is not yet up and running. But I foresee a situation where we register as company secretaries, and then ke register a company, are you a company secretary? Because yes, it's all that information you upload automatically together with my practice and certificates and so on. Yes, I foresee such a situation.
Okay, okay. No, that makes sense.
Yes.
What was the problem before? Why did we need an amendment there in that area?
I don't know.
It's just an issue of just to make sure we have KYC.
Yes. I think so. Okay. I think so, yes.
Okay. Annual returns, is there any change apart from the fact that SIPA had initially said now companies needed to upload a constitution as well when they do their annual returns, which now they have changed to say, okay, now companies have 12 months now?
Yes, so 12 months from January 2025. To upload the constitution at S.1.
Yes.
Because what they had been doing in the past, I think, month or so, is they were saying to people, if you don't upload your constitution, then you can't upload your annual returns. And I think someone just said to them,
yeah, that's
because
how
does the law give people 12 months and then you give people a week? Be reasonable. And I think they reversed that, because I'm seeing people able to upload annual returns now, and they have plenty of opportunity to then upload their constitutions later.
Okay.
The thing is, people need to get to it, because if they don't upload their constitutions, then their companies could get deregistered.
Deregistration or removal from register. What does that
mean? So when you register a company, right, that company is then on a particular register.
Yeah.
Or that's why it has a unique identifying number.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if your company is deregistered or removed from the register, it then means it no longer exists. Yes.
So someone might be sitting there and thinking, yeah, but I do this. I was document I never really use them for anything. I operate my business without them and etc. Why should I be worried if they remove me from the register? It's not going to change anything.
Hey, but remember, when you apply for so many things, right? BURS, detender, all that. Babata, not only the registration certificate, but also the extract. The shareholder, director, and if you deal with companies regularly, extract certificate, they have a date stamp. Right? And also these entities have the ability to also go onto the system to verify. Or name, is this true? It's a certificate on paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're not there, then you don't have a company.
Yeah, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Aside from that, the other thing is, when you register a company, so when that person ceases to exist, then all contracts tied to that person cease to exist. So that company. As soon as that company stops existing, you're in breach of those contracts. And you find if you continue to operate a non-existent company, now there's no corporate veil to protect you from liability.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. And more, I don't know if it has to do with listing and fronting and what. Even just private entities have, like if you are supplying an insurance company that has nothing to do with government, they'll still ask for these documents.
Yes,
and because they still want to know.
Because they need to know the entity exists, right?
Yeah.
And this is because if something goes wrong or there's breach and you go to court, right?
Yeah.
There should be something or someone to sue.
Yes.
So if the contract is between Bonolo Pty Ltd and whatever insurance company, that entity doesn't, the entity doesn't exist. It creates a difficulty. And in fact, it's one of the amendments that's been introduced in the Companies Act to say, if there's ongoing litigation or you want to sue, you can apply to court for reinstatement of the company for the period of the litigation.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that, you know, Batabaska, Puaranya, the company, right? And the reason why that is important is because if you bring a matter to pierce the corporate veil, you have to start by suing the company and saying, through this company, these people never sing. So as the court go through the company to get to those other people.
Yes.
And that's where the beneficial owners, the controlling minds, the actual shareholders, actual directors come to play.
You mentioned this phrase twice already. Let's get to it.
Which one?
The company, legal personality, and piercing the corporate veil.
Yes.
What is the corporate veil? What is the corporate veil?
So the corporate veil is a legal fiction.
Okay.
And effectively, the law has said when you create this entity that is a company, there's a thing that separates the company from the owners and directors.
Yeah.
And that thing is called a corporate veil.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And what it does is it says the company can get into trouble without the owners and the directors getting into trouble. It is only in instances of fraud where people actually,
yeah.
For a company in the asset company to buy things in my own name and things like that. So if you're able to show what these people did is they were robbing this person called the company in order for them to benefit directly. That's when you can bring matters at court or you need this legal fiction, corporate veil, so that I can go directly to the people behind the curtain.
Yeah, and you know, as small companies, it's something that happens a lot where you find the directors of the company or owners of the company. Maybe they own a company, company mortgage, school fees. How the bank statement is a company, you know, this person doesn't even have a salary. You know, they're just you know, and is that a problem? What's the problem with that?
Because the problem is this, right? Why you such a salary? Right? If you're going to have the company pay for your car, your mortgage, all of these things, why don't you get that amount of money as your salary? And then go, right?
Yeah.
Because then it justifies the expense for the company. The expense to the company is your salary, but not your mortgage. It's your personal mortgage. So you should be paying for it.
100%.
Why is the company paying for it?
Yeah, I know guys out there screaming, saying, yeah, ask him more. Again, my friend owns a law firm. I've been fortunate to have these conversations with her behind the scenes. So now I know why I can't be paying my mortgage with my company. Like, this is why I have a salary. It's very clear. You know, and it's little, but here's what I found also with business. If you don't put systems in place at the beginning of the thing, when it grows, and it will grow if it grows. No, but you know, spending 2 pula aside won't be different than spending 200 pula aside. And that's where you're going to find yourself in your quota. From the beginning. And you're going to have problems.
And then we tell people use the company as a slush fund. Right? Because how na salary is okay. 100 pula wami, is 100 pula wami, or hella kono, right? But if you get used to using the company as a slush fund, then you open your eyes and you've spent 100,000. Ele monate, ele this, ele that. Even they say anything related to the company,
the business,
right? But even from a tax perspective, that's very problematic because it effectively distorts the finances of the company, right? Where you make it seem as if the liabilities are company when they're actually not the company's liabilities, they're your personal liabilities. Yes.
These are whole lot of companies. School fees. Taekwondo rule.
Taekwondo rule.
What is Taekwondo rule?
So the Taekwondo rule is a very enjoyable rule. In that it says if somebody is put out there as a representative of a company and they enter into contracts with third parties, then the company and other officers in the company are stopped from being able to say Nyan Toyo did not have the power to enter into that contract. Yeah. So, for example, but it also depends on the type of position the person holds in the company and also the impression that the company has given to third parties about this person.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So I'll give you an example where you have a company secretary. So, in fact, all the times, company secretaries are not inside the company.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you keep saying to Bonolo, no, deal with my company secretary, deal with my company secretary, deal with my company secretary. And then we enter into a contract where I'm saying, okay, Carlos, supply 100 bucket heads at 20 pula per hat, right? And in your mind, you are thinking, okay, no, na bucket head, take 50 pula bucket head.
Yeah.
But because you've been saying for everything to do with the company, company secretary, you've demonstrated to me this is the level of power that the company secretary has in your company. So if I then enter into this contract with the company secretary and I don't know the inner workings of your company, right? Then you are stopped in law from saying, no. Actually, the company secretary didn't have the power to do that.
Yeah.
Because you are the one that gave me the impression that the company secretary has all of these powers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yo, that's nuts.
We're not talking about like a driver.
Yes,
right?
Yes, of course.
We're not talking about Homoe secretary and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Unless Homoe secretary that seeming power as well, where everything Kenya talk to my secretary, get the meeting over your secretary, I want to contact meeting, so that your PA is effectively running your company.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And ordinarily I'd be like, okay, no, the secretary is not the decision maker. But the way you've made me deal with this person, you've given me the impression that this is the decision maker. So if they enter into a contract that is not beneficial for your company, you are stopped in law from saying, this secretary, this PA did not have the power to enter into this contract. Because now conduct the meeting, the interviews, you know what I mean?
No, I'm quiet and I'm going through my mind right now because I'm trying to think, what? My assistant, how much power have I given this woman?
Right?
Like,
exactly.
Because, yo, that's crazy. Okay, I like the fact that when as the owner of the business, you have to give the impression to whoever.
Yes.
Or this person, this other person.
Yes.
Can.
But not even just as an owner, because companies will have shareholders, directors, and so on.
Yeah.
So someone in a position of authority effectively gives that impression to the third party. Or Remoto has the ability to do anything or to contract and all of these things.
Okay. So essentially we are saying, just get your stuff together as far as that's concerned.
Yes.
Yeah, and it must be very clear. Or even the roles and duties and responsibilities in the company, it must be very clear.
Yes.
Imagine I'm sending her to a supplier every single time, sending her to a supplier, and then
are nice and right? And then the supplier is like, who are you?
Yeah. Exactly. Like,
who are you and why are you here?
Oh man. Yeah, which is what Bonolo always says to me. Everything is great. Always think about when it's bad, when things don't go well.
And that's where lawyers come in.
Oh man.
That's where lawyers come in. And that's why I always say to people, they need to get advice. Right? To put measures in place. Or when things go sideways, as much as possible.
Okay. Hey, there's so much we can cover, but let's wrap it up with liquidations and judicial management.
Before we get to liquidations and judicial management, one of the things they have been up in arms about, audited financials.
Yes.
Right. And what I've been hearing from a lot of people, because it's being run by a lawyer. Like I said, some of these amendments, like the Constitution, is from 2022. So when people are hard done, they'll just point and say, hey, that's the issue. And then with the auditing, right? In terms of a company, there are two types of main companies. There's an exempt company and a non-exempt company.
Okay.
So an exempt company is a company that makes, I think it's 5 million or less per annum.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, it has assets of 5 million or less, and the turnover is less than 10 million. This is per annum. Right? And what the Companies Act said is there's a form that needs to be completed for purposes of the financials, right?
Okay.
But unfortunately, I looked through the amendment and I couldn't see the prescribed form. Meaning, this is in relation to an exempt company.
Okay.
But a non-exempt company, right? The asset that's more than 5 million. Annual turnover of more than 10 million. Submit those audited financials.
Okay.
So all companies seem to be asked in terms of the law submit the statement that's about the bank statement. The difference is that with exempt companies, in together with those statements, whereas in relation to the non-exempt company, Boneba submit the audited financial.
Who can do this auditing?
Auditors.
Apart from auditing firms?
I think it can only be auditors.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I don't think there's any other profession that would have the ability to do this.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So how is it like? That to me is because it's just like, hey man, I'm whatever legal sort of improvements that we do, I'm for them, because it can only be good, right? I'm for them. So if the lawyers happen to eat, then look, man, but
let the lawyers eat.
But it's not their
Are you
fault
sure it's not that you see some lawyer somewhere, who sometimes does a podcast with you?
Some lawyers just started their firms, they need the business. So please, let the lawyers eat. Before we get to liquidations, I want to go back a little bit. Sorry, I don't know how I skipped this one. etc. Please break down proxies. Or whatever the case is. What is that?
So proxies are used in relation to specifically the meeting. Where they're either directors' meetings or shareholders' meetings, and you're asking for someone to appear on your behalf. Right, to make decisions in relation to whatever motion would be there for consideration or whatever decision is being required. Because the meeting, the director and the shareholder, they have to be called on notice, where you then set out what it is that you want the business of that particular meeting to be. And sometimes the day that they want, it's something that is quite urgent, not like extremely urgent, but proper notice can be given, but generally a conflict. Court, for example, right? Then I can then say, okay, Carlos, I'm going to appoint you as my proxy on this issue, depending on this particular type of information that you get, right? And then I have to submit the proxy form to the directors Carlos as a proxy for this particular meeting, and so on. Yes.
Here's a scenario. Maybe let's say I'm in textile, right? And then the government 20 years from now decides they want to appoint me as the director of the Textile Association or something like that, right? And because there's conflict with and the association deals directly with textile issues, there's conflict of interest because I have a business, etc. And then I say, okay, just so there's no conflict, let me transfer my shares over to my wife, and then she's the shareholder in the company, and then I'm not shareholder anymore. I can proceed with my duties to the association. Is that legal?
Yes and no. It depends, as always. So, when you transfer your shares to your wife, are you transferring them indeed? So that to the outside it looks like you're the only shareholder. Right? Number one. Number two, that does not take care of your conflict. Because it's your wife.
My wife, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's say a friend, someone far,
yeah.
whatever the case is.
That relationship, whether your friend, your family, your wife,
it's a conflict.
It's a conflict.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. I get you.
And I say this because there's a possibility of you disposing of your shares entirely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you dispose it to an unrelated third party, then that disposes of your conflict.
Yeah. No
right.
problems. Yeah.
But would you not have been appointed to this position because you are in the textile industry?
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So does it then make sense for you to remove yourself or recuse yourself or dispose of your shares? Because now you're no longer in the industry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's a balancing exercise.
As you're saying, it depends.
Yes, right? Yeah. And usually how we work a conflict, usually, not in all instances, below direct benefit. So the textile industry, babata host like a show to showcase.
Yeah.
And so one of these dollars 5.
Yes.
And there are 100 companies that are applying to be given those stalls. And your company is one of those hundreds. Stall.
Got
right?
You. Got
In
you.
that
Then
instance, there's a clear conflict.
Yeah.
Right? Next day, let's follow and
you know, then
I'd be like, exactly. Like, oh, Carlos.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay, cool stuff. Because I thought proxies were that, actually. I was very wrong. I thought proxies were where you can say, okay, you know what, let me just step away from this entity.
Yes.
I'm just going to hand over my shares to someone. They're not yours. They're still mine. But just so I don't, because I remember even the current president, there was a point where he had to let go of his firm or something. I think he had a law firm before.
Yes.
And he had to, so legally what was going on there? And I think he had to hand it over to someone else to run or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about that? Let's just wait. Can you talk about that?
I guess I can talk about it because it also happens with judges as well. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
But before then, before I deal with this issue, the firm, what you are describing is a beneficial shareholder and nominee shareholder. Right? In that particular instance, you're effectively saying meaning you're making this person a nominee. So in the share register, it has to be shown whether you are the actual shareholder or beneficial shareholder, and the person is a nominee shareholder because they're holding the shares for you.
Yes. So who's the actual beneficiary there?
You.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
Because they're your shares.
Yes.
And this person who is.
Okay.
And how they are nominee shareholder.
Got you.
The thing is, people don't then do that. Shares.
Yeah.
Me on the share register, it is my name that says Gidi shares.
Yes.
Right? And yet we know.
Yes. I'm asking because this case. I was like, wait, I know for sure this is this man's company.
Yes.
And there was someone else. I was like, no.
Yeah. And it also goes to issues of competition.
Right? Yes.
More industry. Let's say we are in the beef industry.
Yeah.
And the beef industry is only the meat sector. There's the hide sector. There's the hooves and horns that make glue sector.
Yeah.
The sector is a company in the meat, and I have a company in the hides, right? And then next thing, I have a company or shares in a company in the glue sector. My companies get on dominating everything, right? That's anti-competition, and that is an unfair competition practice, right? Because market people can't penetrate. So what then people do is that get more company in the meat industry. And then these other the companies in these two other industries, they begin right? Quote unquote, but the truth of the matter is control a market. I guess the middleman the up and comer no okay, the price right? I can afford it. And then I buy it for a song and all of these, you know what I mean?
100%.
So it's those type of things that are trying to be curbed. This is an unfair practice to competition. That's why when certain people corner the market, it then becomes a problem from a competition and competition authority. Is it still competition and consumer authority?
I don't know. I was about to say actually, competition authorities. That's another discussion that we need to have. Another full-on discussion on its own, because I don't understand how some of these industries or how some of these people are moving, man. Like it's just like, wait, there's this one person that we know in this entire industry, fam, and every single firm that comes up tries to compete, they buy it up, and they either kill it or they just attach it to their own thing, and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's so big where you're just like, wait, how are now these people are actually controlling the prices in the market? They're the ones who are saying, yeah, no, this is how much this thing is supposed to cost, and everybody else has to follow suit. Oh man.
Yes. And that's the reason why things like disclosing who the true shareholder is have to be there, right? Aside from money laundering, aside from the cancer liability, well, you cannot have one person or a group of these small people, like a small group of people, controlling an entire industry to the detriment of some.
Got you. How long have we been talking there? It's been an hour.
No, you know what? Carlos, then I get paid to talk. So we keep going.
Liquidation and judicial management. It's not a 5-minute conversation.
No, it's not.
So it's layered. So I don't know if you want to pause it here and then you continue next week, or do we want to do what I love to do, which is just, if you want to find out more, there's a number you can call.
Look, the intent of today was to talk about the amendment to the Companies Act. So if they want to find out more about the judicial management, the liquidation, they can hit me up. They know where to find me.
Call Bonolo. She will break it down and help out where she can help out.
And the reason why it is important to have this discussion is because there are certain entities that cannot just be liquidated by anyone. And I'll give you an example. Some companies that fall under NBFIRA, right? And Holibule Securities Act and so on, like the insurance company. When an insurance company is in financial trouble, off the street, I cannot just liquidate or put them under judicial management. It has to be through NBFIRA.
I'm thinking the person who oversees now or entity that oversees, what's it called?
What? NBFIRA?
No, not NBFIRA. When they appoint someone to oversee the business, when they say, okay, you guys
like
are
a judicial manager.
Where they come and say, we're going to take this thing away from you and then hand it over to someone who can run it the right way.
And the reason why this is important is because it would be a company, right? And therefore you would think, well, you can liquidate under the Companies Act. But because it's a company within a certain industry, that industry will have rules in relation to how you can liquidate that entity.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything else. Now I'm done on my side.
Well, there are plenty of other amendments.
Yeah.
And you know what we've been doing now is people can use the model constitution that is attached to the act to upload onto the system.
Okay.
The problem is that it is not tailor-made for your company.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And sometimes, like if you look at the model constitution, it will say things like these powers that the directors cannot be liquidated. Cannot be delegated. And they'll say powers in terms of section 200, powers in terms of section 105, and right? So it then requires you to keep going back to the Companies Act and saying, hey, come on, 105 200. So when you tailor make the constitution, you're able to then particularize which powers are there that cannot be delegated by the directors. Which powers do you want to say they're only for shareholders? This is how the meetings will be conducted. This is what, this is that.
Constitution, can you only do it once?
No, you can keep updating it and amending it and so on.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking maybe for like smaller companies that probably have like one shareholder, one director, whatever, you can probably use this one, the one that's on the act. But now when you start involving other entities, when you are bringing in investors, etc., all that stuff, that's when now you need to go and go to Bonolo and say, Bonolo, to go the company constitution.
Yes, but the problem is, especially for smaller companies, the shareholder is the director.
Yes.
How do you manage that?
Yeah.
Right. So in that particular, in fact, the model constitution works better for bigger companies because you find how the bigger companies actually have that separation between shareholders and directors. And it's very general, right? But for smaller companies where this person is a shareholder and a director, they need to actually set out clearly for how are those roles going to be operated in a way that it's clear to delineate. Or I'm acting in my capacity as a director. I'm acting in my capacity as a shareholder.
And clear to who? Who is that important to? The law, yourself?
To you, to the law, and to the authority.
Okay.
Yes, because I have seen it so many times, Carlos, where a husband, a wife, or three, they are all shareholders, all directors. And the way they then make decisions, when you look at the minutes, you can't tell, or is this a director's meeting? Is this a shareholders meeting? And then it creates problems now because if you do that, you're falling short of some of your duties.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
You're looking at me like, hey,
but it's very important because it's vital. There's going to come a time where now maybe my industry is going to need to be protected.
Yes.
All of this stuff is for the benefit of Motswana at the end of the day. I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Another amendment you want to talk about, or you want
No. I think that's it.
Okay.
We can talk about the amendments till the crows come.
Yeah.
Because the 2022 and 2025 amendments have to be read together. Because there's significant changes that are made by the 2022 and simply buttressed the 2025.
Okay.
So if you look at the Companies Act, the 2022 amendment exactly.
Okay, where can we find these documents?
Hey, you can find them at government printers.
Okay.
Ordinarily.
Okay.
But I will always encourage people who are subscribed to Government Gazette. Right? And people always assume go subscribe to government gazette for purposes of the tender. But that's where the bills are published. That's where the acts are published. That's when the commencement date are published and things like that. So it's not just tenders, little notification like change of names and last names, the acting appointment, especially like the president, ministers, PSs, and all that. So there's so many things that you are able to get from the government gazette.
Okay. How often does the government gazette come out, and how much does it cost for the subscription?
It comes out every Friday.
Okay.
And I think for an annual subscription, you get 2,000 pula.
Oh, that's not. That's okay.
It's not bad at all, right?
Yeah, it's not bad.
You feel 2,000 pula is too high. You can agree, little 2, 3, or 4. Or 500 pula, 500 pula. Or subscribe you, I believe share the government gazette there.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. That's literally what I'm going to do. And a friend of mine who are going to buy,
you know?
And then go, yeah. Okay. Now, fantastic. Always a pleasure, B.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Carlos. Next week is episode 10.
Next week is episode 10.
We need to do something for episode 10.
Sunganya. I got a little timile braga weekend. All right, B2B Thinking Law, episode 9 ends just like that. Thank you, B.
Thank you so much, Carlos. You look so much better. Right?
Oh, is it?
Yes. But now you're like, I told you, motivate.
Yeah.
And it gives you that thing.
No, you can have that. Not it's me talking to Bolo.
It's
not no, we can be talking about anything. I'm awakened and enlightened. Like, I had no idea about that. So thank you so much, man.
And thank you, Carlos.
Back next week.
Yep.
Howdy.
Bye. Catch the Botswana Thinking Law podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and catch Botswana Thinking Law on various social media platforms, Facebook, X, TikTok, and so on, where we talk about Botswana law in English and Setswana.